Greeting students, welcome to Excellers, and we are undergoing CLAT coaching. So as far as CLAT is concerned, GK or general knowledge is very important. It has around 25% weightage. In that itself, we are not just studying current affairs or what's happening in the world right now. We'll also learn a lot of static GK. Along with that, we'll also learn about constitution, we'll learn about Indian foreign policy, various world events, etc. And today let's discuss about international relations. So why international relations? Because international relations, no one focuses a lot about it. It's hardly discussed as far as CLAT is concerned, and that's why I thought let's start with this particular topic. So let us discuss about international relations and how exactly is it relevant for your exam as such. So this slide will cover what exactly is international relations. We'll do a case study. I will also look into a sample question. That's how I designed this particular class. So firstly, what exactly is international relations? So international relations discusses any form of interaction across borders, mainly across national borders, but also everyone considers international relations to be a highly uh, country-based concept that only interaction between countries can be included in international relations, but that's not exactly true. In interaction between common people of different countries, communities across different countries, companies across different countries, also the governments are all included in international relations. So it's a very broad-based understanding that you need to have. And what exactly is international relations for your exam point of view? So international relations is an academic field which comes under political science. So political science does have a big say in international relations, but let's not restrict it to highly theoretical form of international relations, because international relations is much more practical. It is application based as well, which many people often ignore. Everyone focuses on the theory, but let's also look into the practical and more application oriented aspects of the subject as well. And international relations, as we know, is a very state centric concept. What does state centricity mean? That means we live in a world of countries or nation states where the sovereignty ultimately lies with your countries or nation states. So international relations also views things from a very state-centric perspective. That is, anything that's beyond one country's borders is considered as international. So even if you are like going abroad for travel or work, if someone asks you, "Who are you?" you will say you are an Indian. Hardly you will say the place that you belong to in India as such, or that I'm a man or I'm a woman or I'm a trans or etc. So immediately you will identify yourself with the name of your country or the nationality. That means we still live in that state-centric world, and international relations is also a state-centric concept. I hope you understood this particular slide that I presented here. So next, move on. So why do we study international relations? Why? The question of why. So international relations not just discusses the problems between countries and whatnot that you see on the TV. It's not just about wars. It's not just about terrorism or trade as such. It's much more than that. That's what we'll discuss here. First point, very basic, that international relations does include trade, but it also includes movement of people, the movement of property, movement of anything across the world. Even COVID-19 pandemic, which is a movement of virus across the world, that is also very well covered under international relations. So movement, we can say immigration, a hot topic that's discussed today with respect to the US, the Europe, then other Western countries. Then it can also refer to services also, services, then goods. Then it can also refer to biological movement also. Then change in weather patterns, migratory animals, all those things or do come into international relations, because at the end of the day, it will alter the local geographies as well. Then communication. The most globalized entity in the world right now is internet. Then we'll also discuss things like postal services, which affect every day of our life. Postal services, courier services, then TV, Then we can include new age communication technologies like 5G also. So all these communication technologies are affected through international relations because the world is now a global village. We live in a very small world. Then let us discuss about climate change. So climate change is a global problem. It's no more a problem of only one country or a group of countries. Neither it's a problem that restricts with just one part of the world. A small change in climate in one part of the world will definitely affect rest of the world. Say for example, the melting of polar caps. Automatically, our cities which lie on the coast, including ours all, the population in that region and all will be negatively affected. That's climate change. Then is security. So security is the most important aspect of international relations, which generally deals with how countries are trying to keep themselves secure. In that the traditional security which deals with wars, then borders, etc. But new age securities are also included, like human security, economic security, food security, water security. So all those new age concepts also will be studying in international relations, and they're affecting our day-to-day life. All the issues that we see across the world, whether it be conflicts, terrorism, then all the other concepts also come under the broad area of security. Then we have conflict, peace, and terrorism. Again, broadly comes under security, but still it's written as a separate field because many people study it separately as part of the traditional uh, type of security studies, where everything is about conflicts happening across the world between different countries, different communities, civil war. How can we ensure peace? The role of United Nations, the role of international law. Then coming to terrorism, how terrorism is born, how it flourishes across the world, counter-terrorism. Then how do we prevent terrorism from emerging again? So all these issues are all covered in international relations, and you can see all these problems are affecting us day-to-day life. Fifth, and the one of the most important in the recent time, the pandemic, the COVID-19, which everyone witnessed. And previously, the last pandemic that happened was in 1920, around 100 years before this particular pandemic was there. So everyone across this world were affected indirectly or directly by COVID-19 pandemic. So pandemic has become an international issue, a security issue. Lastly, law and transnational crimes, which very important for your CLAT as well as your legal career. That is international law. International law is what? Law between different countries that governs trade, that governs movement of people, that looks into law of war, uh, human rights. All those things are international law. Those affect us day to day. And also transnational crimes like smuggling, uh, that includes drug trafficking, even things like narco terrorism, cyber terrorism, all those new age threats that we see today. So all these things make international relations a very compelling subject that everyone should learn today. It's very much important part of your syllabus that you should be aware of all these things beyond your syllabus. Okay. Now, let's study a bit of the evolution of international relations. What exactly is international relations? How did it evolve to what we have it today? So, international relations as such is not an independent domain. So, it used to be part of political science for a very long time. But now, international relations across the world, when it's studied in different universities, it has certain autonomy which it separates itself from political science. That means everything that's discussed in international relations is not just political science. So you study environment, you study new age things like sports. You can study about health. You can study more about terrorism. You can study more about soft power. You can study more about warfare. So you don't have to traditionally look international relations only from a political science point of view. You can also focus on various other fields which you should interact with. So international relations got a bit of autonomy and in the 20th century. So you can come to the third point. You can see Carnegie Corporation in 1911 decided that they'll focus more on peace. So Carnegie institution largely looks at conflicts and peace. They looked at how we need to look this world from a different perspective than what's generally given by political scientists and all. So that's how they initiated their own courses, and they were like a think tank, which gave a unique perspective on international relations that's largely different from political science. It was University of Wales in 1919 that started their own Department of International Relations. Later, that was followed by London School of Economics. Even today, it's a reputed institution for studying political science as well as international relations. So, London School of Economics, before which you had the University of Wales, all these institutions they incorporated international relations as a separate domain. So, relatively, international relations is a new subject for everyone to learn. It's hardly 100 years old. You compare that with political science, statecraft, law, which are like centuries old subjects. Lastly, what's the recent evolution? From traditional, we are moving to non traditional in terms of international relations. So, no more everything in international relations are related with war and peace. As I already mentioned, climate change, transnational crimes, terrorism, then cyber issues, cyber security, all these things are also given very much importance in this new age. That is your 21st century. So this you can say this as a late 20th to 21st century phenomenon. Okay. Now let us look at international relations from a historic point of view. So how did international relations emerge in the past 500 years? Okay. So everything begins at 1648 through Treaty of Westphalia. This is a treaty that everyone should remember, whether you are in political science, law, or international relations, or any social science subject, history also. So, what happened at Treaty of Westphalia? There was a 30-year war that shook Europe. So, that shake-up resulted in a peace treaty known as Treaty of Westphalia, where countries came together. At that time, they were empires. So, they had fluid borders, flexible borders, people could move around easily. And they said, we are now going to draw lines on the map, crystallizing our borders so that we don't end up fighting for our borders. That means people were now stopped from moving across these borders. So, largely in Western Europe, they clearly drew borders between empires so that people don't cross each other and these countries don't have to fight on border issues. So, from then on, this principle has given rise to nation state system. That means states now clearly have borders, very well defined borders, which people can't cross that easily. Yes, of course, there are exceptions to it, but that rigidity came from 1648. Since then, we live in a world dominated by nation states. So it's nation state that govern this world today. They are sovereign, they are very powerful, they can implement laws on ground. They can also stop laws from being implemented. They fight each other on various issues. They can restrict movement of people. They can restrict movement of companies. They can restrict revenue flows. They can restrict economic activity. So we live in a world that's governed by nation state, and that impact of nation state or state centricity is still seen in international relations. So that's why history of international relations cannot be talked without reference to 1648 Treaty of Westphalia. Then we come to an important period in world history. This is 1815 to 1914. If you think about it from a very historic point of view, you can see that was a period of immense political instability. So why do we say it as a political instability across the world? It was because Europe was undergoing a big journey. Maps were being redrawn each and every time. There were movements of nationalism that were rising within different countries like Germany, Italy also, and within countries like France. You can see democracy coming and going, dictatorships emerging. So a lot of churning up happening, and its domestic effect was led implemented on rest of the world as in the form of colonialism. So colonialism now had a new way. Now you have British Empire, Spanish Empire, Dutch Empire, French Empire, and these countries were trying to conquer more and more areas. And that almost all these conflicts together Ended in what? What happened in 1914? Take a guess. The answer is in next slide. Yes. So that culminated in what we know as World War One. So now let us go through a brief timeline of international relations. So we are already on the correct path. Now the timeline here is World War One. So here, what happened? So countries were now fighting with each other. And lastly, a form of peace came up through Treaty of Versailles. So Treaty of Versailles came out of Paris Peace Conference. But for practical purposes, you only have to remember Treaty of Versailles. So Versailles is a town on the outskirts of Paris where this peace treaty was signed that countries will not fight each other, um, and League of Nations was formed. And that League of Nations was not actually effective in restricting countries from fighting. One of the main reasons was major countries were not part of it, like US and USSR didn't join League of Nations. So that was one of the reasons. So then we go through a period of interwar period. That is again a period of instability. Instability. Then colonialism is also now declining. Then you have anti-colonial movements happening within these countries. At the same time, you have countries like Germany and Italy becoming very powerful within Europe, and other countries were trying to stop these countries from rising, as well as you have the rise of Japan. So all these countries together, they were fighting the World War. So these countries versus the other old powerful countries like the US, the UK, the French, the Russians, they all were fighting World War II now. So after World War II, we knew what all happened. Italy was defeated, Germany was defeated, Japan was defeated. After the defeat of all these countries, you have what we know as a peace. Here you have UN formed, then you have the Bretton Woods, which is World Bank, then GATT, all those agreements which were important for world peace as well as prosperity. We'll discuss all of these in depth in GK classes, but I'm just mentioning these names here. Okay. Then US was providing a lot of aid to other countries also. All these prompted Cold War to happen. That is a period of instability again in the world, but again a period of stability also. There was no big war like what we saw in World War One and World War Two. Then we come to the present day. This is your post-Cold War era, where you have a rise of China, rise of small powers, Iran, India, Turkey, all those small powers. Then you also have a dominant USA. Then you also have a declining Europe, as well as you have a declining Russia. This is post-Cold War scenario, which we are in right now. Largely, our universe surrounds with post-Cold War era, but again, how did we come here? That is very important. And that's why I have taken case study of Cold War. It is also very important from your exam point of view. So today we'll discuss more about Cold War. So before we move ahead, I want you to remember few terms that we will use steadily throughout international relations. First one is state. So state, as I already mentioned to you, state is the most important part of international relations because that's what most of the theories do accept. The state is the dominant character. So what is a state? Any state, any region, any uh, any geography with fixed boundaries, then fixed population, has sovereignty, that is the ability to self-rule, and as the ability to have foreign relations with other countries, then other companies and all, that is foreign relations. So if a country has all these three, or a region, they are states. All the countries that we know today, largely states. There are exceptions like Taiwan and all, but again, we don't have to go in depth on the definition right now. Then what is power? So power is nothing but your ability to bring in a change in the system. So we consider international relations, like it does consider the world as a system. So if one power has certain amount of ability to make a change in the system, that's why we call it as a power, or an entity that is able to exercise certain amount of force in the system. Then we have anarchy. We all know there is no world government. UN is not even close to a world government. That is why we believe that this world or this international system is an anarchy, because there is no world government. It doesn't have any sovereignty. Closest we have to a world government is the European Union. So we believe that international system is an anarchy where there is no world government and countries are free to do whatever they want. So in order to curtail that anarchy, you have things like international law, again a questionable concept. Then you have international regimes also, like different courts you have. Then you have European Union, different powers, alliances, and all. Okay. Then diplomacy. What is diplomacy? Diplomacy is how countries have their communications going between these countries. So for example, two countries, if they are always in conflict, how will you de-escalate that conflict? That's why you have relations, diplomacy, where there are representatives of your country in another country trying to make sure everything's going good. Then lastly, geopolitics. So geopolitics often misunderstood as global politics. No, geopolitics means politics of geography. How geography impacts politics and vice versa. That is geopolitics. I hope all these terminologies are clear. So let us proceed. So next, let's look in depth on Cold War. So Cold War as such is a big concept. I've tried to simplify it as maximum as possible. So Cold War is a period in world history that has often seen direct and indirect confrontation between USA and the USSR. So just note down these two players which are the most important in the Cold War. So guess what are these full forms and let me know. So this is your homework. What are the full form of USA and USSR? So why did Cold War happen, or what exactly is Cold War? So we have two thinkers who have given the definition of Cold War as such. Walter Lippmann has said the Cold War is nothing but a diplomatic war. That means war was fought by USA and USSR at the diplomatic level between the heads of states as well as the representative of these respective governments. So that is what the definition of Cold War according to Walter Lippmann was. Similarly, what was Fleming's definition? So Fleming said Cold War was not a war that was fought between US and USSR. It was fought in the minds of the people. Minds of the people of which country or where? Of both the countries as well as of the rest of the world. So we were made to believe that there is some form of war that's going on, even though there was nothing directly as war. Okay, that's what Fleming was trying to argue. That you were made to believe that USSR was an enemy or USA was an enemy, and they are fighting some war. You need more friends, you need more weapons, you need more armaments. So it was a mind game. That's what Fleming said. But again, we know that Cold War in some form actually existed. It's not that it was just an imagination. So, what were the basic reason that people say are the reasons of Cold War? So again, there are multiple accounts on what exactly is the timeline of Cold War, but largely everyone agrees that it ended in 1991 with the collapse of USSR. So such a country doesn't exist now. But it started in 1945, although many people will say it started in 1949, started much further. But for the practical purpose, let's keep it as 1945, because that's when World War II ended. And World War II ended in a very asymmetric fashion. That means the world now saw Many powerful countries fall in World War II. Japan fell, Germany fell, UK fell, that is, Great Britain fell, France fell. It left with two main powers, USA and USSR. So, what exactly now happened? USA by itself decided that we'll have Bretton Woods going, we'll have the United Nations. Of course, USSR was also inculcated in that, but that didn't result in a proper settlement of the war. In the sense that how did World War II end? It ended with dropping of nuclear weapons by USA. So that created fear in the next superpower or the to be superpower USSR, that we didn't have nuclear weapons, USA had nuclear weapons, USA didn't inform us what is happening. So that created fear in the minds of leaders of USSR that this needs to be confronted or that USA is our imminent threat. Similar things happened in US also, where George Kennan, a senior diplomat based in Moscow, he had a feeling that USSR is perceiving USA as their biggest threat. So he wrote a big article in one of the magazine known as the Longman Telegram, where he was convincing the US government, that is the Truman administration, that USSR is witnessing USA as its biggest enemy. We have to do something about it. So that was when USA also started to raise their own voice. So it was a both-sided issue that they had distrust amongst each other. Then there was another important event that happened, which was given by Winston Churchill, who was the British Prime Minister, who gave a speech known as Iron Curtain. That means he said that there will be an Iron Curtain that will move through the Europe, that will divide Soviet sphere of influence as well as the Western sphere of influence. That means the US influence as well as the Western influence, and there will be some form of iron curtain that you can't pass through, or that will create some amount of divide. Maybe if this is Europe, there will be an iron curtain. This will be a Western sphere of influence, and this will be the Soviet sphere of influence. Certain imaginary concept that will move through one of our continents. So all these three reasons we can attribute it to as the main reason for cold. Although there are many other reasons which we can also go through a bit of them during this course. So firstly, we have the Truman Doctrine. So now let's come to the timeline of the events, as well as what exactly did Cold War comprise of. What exactly happened in Cold War? So are you not excited to know more about it? So firstly, we have Truman Doctrine. What is Truman Doctrine? So it's named after the president of USA, Truman. So Harry S. Truman believed that, including many people of the US government, the US administration, they believe that USSR is going to be a big challenger to USA. And this was a big fact at that time. And Harry S. Truman decided that we need to confront USSR across the world. Otherwise, US influence in this world will come down. So why? Because USSR was trying to influence communist parties across the world, even propping up communist parties and also helping them with funds and moral support so that more countries will join the Soviet bloc or they'll join the USSR. So Truman decided that we'll do one thing, we'll also fund uh, capitalist countries, regimes favorable to us, not just capitalist countries, but also any country that is ready to restrict Soviet influence or that any country that is interested in joining them. So, firstly, they did this in two countries, Greece and Turkey. Okay, these were the two countries they US sent money to through Truman Doctrine. So that is his idea, that his doctrine. That's why it's known as Truman Doctrine. Cold War also saw ideological issues between countries, mainly Western countries like Europe, USA, Australia, Japan, and all. But why did that happen? There is something known as Marshall Plan. That is when World War II ended. World War II ended asymmetrically. That was a big loss for Europe. Now, Europe had to be reconstructed. So who will give money to Europe? The two people capable of that were USA and USSR. USA had a lot of funds remaining, and they were a rich country. War wasn't harmful for them. So they decided they'll give a lot of money to European countries so that they can reconstruct themselves, rebuild themselves, and be a loyal US ally. So that is why they gave Marshall Plan, which is a plan to fund Western European countries. Similarly, USSR had their own version of the Marshall Plan, and it's known as the Molotov Plan. So you have Marshall Plan, you have Molotov Plan, best recipe for Cold War. And a big objective of these countries were to restrict their friends from getting funds from the other country. So Molotov Plan restricted countries from getting funds from USA, as well as Marshall Plan successfully making sure that European countries, Western European countries are not dependent on the USSR. Okay. Then formation of friends and foes. So we'll come to that later. But again, generally, many countries decided they'll choose between USA and USSR, which side they want to ally with. And most of the Western countries, a bit of African countries, they decided to go with USA. Some African countries, then Asian countries, and all largely went with USSR. So that changing alliances also happened. And largely, it was an ideological fight between the capitalist countries of global north and the communist countries of the global south, a bit of East European countries, African countries, etc. So this was the main idea of confrontation: capitalist bloc, communist bloc. Okay, and also there was a big ideological fight that was going on between the NATO alliance and Warsaw Pact. What are they? These are military alliance of these two countries. USA's military alliance is NATO. USSR military alliance was Warsaw Pact. Okay, so both of these countries decided that the other country is the threat, so we form an alliance which will help each other in the case of war. Understood? So it was NATO versus Warsaw Pact, capitalism versus communism, Master Plan versus Molotov Plan, and there were a lot of alliances that's happening that I'll help you if you are the enemy of the other person. So that also happened. Then Cold War also saw assassination attempts, interventions, other forms of involvement, Fidel Castro. Then you have assassination of John F. Kennedy. You have assassination of a lot of small and big leaders across the world. And all these countries were also getting involved in the other countries' politics also. Like you know what happened in Cuba, Vietnam, then Korea's, then what happened in China, what happened in other countries also. Most important part of Cold War was the nuclear arms race between these two countries, USA and USSR. They were making up nuclear weapons to that extent that the world would have ended if they even a fraction of the weapons were used. This is known as mutually assured destruction. That means even if one country used nuclear weapon against the other country will have enough nuclear weapons to destroy you also. So just because you were able to use that nuclear weapon doesn't mean you are powerful, because you will also be destroyed immediately soon after. The only hope in all this confrontation was detente. What is detente? A period of relative calm in between all these events. Say, for example, Cold War went on for 40, 50 years, but there was a period of relative calm in between, and so that in between calm periods were known as detente, or a period of relative calm. There were still conflicts and issues going on, but still they were relatively much better. Okay, so these are the Cold War alliances that I was talking about. The red is Warsaw Pact. The Eastern European countries, USSR, Hungary, Poland, Romania, all those countries are Warsaw Pact. And you can see here roughly the Iron Curtain going. Okay, the separation between the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. And here you have more important alliance, that is NATO, which still has relevance today. So NATO is North Atlantic countries located over the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so it's very easy to remember a lot of these countries because they're very well known countries for you, and you can just roughly through geography and your basic GK you can understand the names of these countries. Okay, And also remember that Germany was divided at that point in time. So there was East Germany, which was part of the Warsaw Pact, and the West Germany, that was part of the Western Bloc. Cold War also saw proxy wars. Proxy wars like Korean War, Vietnam War, Afghanistan. So Afghanistan was a different case that was different from Korea and Vietnam. But again, these were all proxy wars. What is proxy war? Both USA and USSR were not directly involved, but they were supporting the respective governments or respective groups in these countries. Like in Afghanistan, you can see Mujahideen that was funded and supported by USA. Similarly, in Vietnam, both the governments were supported by USA and USSR. In Korea, also same thing happened. But again, in Vietnam, US was more involved. Korea also, US was more involved. But in Afghanistan, it was USSR which was more involved. Okay. Similarly, you have a very important crisis that you should remember. That is Cuban Missile Crisis. What is Cuban Missile Crisis? So NATO happened, Warsaw Pact happened. So US was now trying to deploy its missiles in respective countries so that these countries will also be protected under the US nuclear umbrella. That means US was giving security free to all these countries. In turn, uh, there will be troops, there will be missiles, there will be nuclear weapons and all that will be given to these countries. So US missiles were initially kept in Italy and Turkey. In so this crisis happened in 1962 in the month of October. So roughly this particular period in time. So US missiles were kept in Italy and Turkey. This angered USSR. So if you see on this map, you can see this is Italy and this is Turkey. They're quite on the frontiers of Eastern Bloc. That angered USSR a lot. So USSR decided that it will deploy missiles where on the frontiers of USA because these were US missiles. So let us fight directly with USA. So they went and deployed here, Cuba. Okay, Cuba was located on the border of USA, just miles off the coast in Cuba. So USSR silently did it without a lot of not of um, surveillance, or it tried to do it silently without any country knowing. It was not very clear that they were actually doing. It was US pipelines and US intelligence that actually found that USSR was actually doing it. So it took a lot of time for them actually to confirm all these details. By now, when US understood that this was happening, John F. Kennedy was the president at that time. He decided that he'll escalate the situation. He said, USSR, no, you are not supposed to do it. Okay, you are not supposed to deploy missiles in our neighborhood. USSR said, then why did you deploy your missiles in our neighborhood? So there was a fight going on between these two countries. Nikita Khrushchev of USSR and John F. Kennedy, at the end of the day, within 2 weeks, they decided that they'll mutually disengage. That means US missiles will be withdrawn from Turkey and Italy. In return, USSR will withdraw their missiles from Cuba. So that mutual disengagement happened, but in between there were a lot of fear that nuclear war will happen anytime because see, USSR weapons were now in Cuba. It will just take few seconds for these missiles to hit USA, any part of USA. Similarly, US missiles also will take just fraction of second to hit any city in USSR or any part of Warsaw Pact. So that fear gripped the world for 2 weeks. Okay. So guess another event that took place roughly at the same period of time in 1962. Okay. That is your homework. So that ended in a form of mutual disengagement. At the same time, there was a big issue that was happening throughout the world, still relevant today, the Israel-Palestine question. So throughout the Cold War period, all these events happened, including Israel-Palestine, and there are a lot of events happening. Iraq happened, uh, Kuwait happened, Iran issues in Iran. A lot of different things happened in Cold War, which we can't discuss within this short time frame. But these were the main events that people generally associate with Cold War. Okay. Then there were different agreements that were signed during the Cold War period. That includes PTBT, that was related with nuclear weapons, test ban treaty, partial test ban treaty, outer space treaty, then NPT, that is a non-nuclear proliferation treaty, SALT one, anti-ballistic missile uh, treaty, Helsinki Accords, SALT two, INF treaty. So these are all Cold War treaties, very important. If you can remember their names as well as the purpose along with the year, it will be really good. That will be beneficial for your exam. Okay. Now, who were the leaders during Cold War? Very important. It will be good if you can name them, but it's not very important that you learn each and every name. At least some important names are very important if you learn them. From USA, you had Harry S. Truman, Dwight D. Eisenhower in the same order. This is the order of leaders. John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Okay. So if you can't remember each and every name, at least remember very important names. Harry S. Truman, yes. Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, then you can remember Nixon, remember Carter, remember Ronald Reagan. Okay. Then from USSR, Joseph Stalin, Nikita Khrushchev, Leonid Brezhnev, Yuri Andropov, Cherenko, Mikhail Gorbachev. So here also remember whoever you feel is very important. But from my side, I'll say Stalin, Khrushchev, and you can say Gorbachev. Then other leaders, Winston Churchill of UK, Fidel Castro of Cuba, then Margaret Thatcher of UK, Mao Zedong, which country? Deng Xiaoping again, which country? Reza Shah Pahlavi of Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran, Chiang Kai-shek, again, decide which country, Abdul Nasser of Egypt. You can also say Nehru was also a very important person who was part of the Cold War. We'll discuss that in non-aligned movement and other details. Okay, so we have come to the end of the Cold War case study. Now I want you to read the sample question and answer few multiple choice question that I've given. So go through this particular paragraph. I'll just read for you. You can also pause and read to understand this particular question. So Cold War was a half-century long state of political tension and military rivalry between two world superpowers, the capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union. Though they were never fought directly, the conflict waged through nuclear arms race, space race, espionage efforts, ideological propaganda, numerous proxy wars in countries like Korea and Vietnam. Europe was symbolically divided by the Iron Curtain and the physical Berlin Wall. The era of tensions concluded with a gradual collapse of communist regimes in Eastern Europe and dissolution of Soviet Union in 1991. So this is the question. You can read it again if you want. But again, if you didn't read it also, never mind. So here are three questions for you. So usually for CLAT, you have paragraph-based questions also. So now, out of whatever I've given you in this particular class, you can easily answer these three questions. Who gave the term Iron Curtain? Is it Harry S. Truman, Jawaharlal Nehru, Winston Churchill, or Joseph Stalin? Who? Guess the answer. What was the name of the alliance formed by USSR? Is it Moscow Pact? Is it Warsaw Pact? Is it Socialist Pact? Or is it Eastern Pact? What is the answer? When did Cuban Missile Crisis happen? I know it's an out-of-box question, but I've already mentioned in this class verbally. I haven't mentioned it on the slide. So it's a bit tricky question. If you are listening to the class properly, you can answer this question. Is it September 1961, September 1962, October 1961, or October 1962? What is the answer? Okay, so now it's time for the answers. So with the bold is your answer. So the first answer is Winston Churchill. So he gave the term Iron Curtain and the speech. Then alliance formed by USSR is Warsaw Pact. So Warsaw is located in Poland. Okay, don't get confused that it's a city in USSR. No, it's a city in Poland. Then when did Cuban Missile Crisis happen? October 1962. There's one more homework. Just look, where was NATO treaty signed? Where was North Atlantic Treaty signed? I'll just write for you. NATO, where was it signed? Okay. So thank you so much. I hope you really like this particular session where we discussed what is the importance of GK in CLAT, what is the importance of international relations in CLAT, why do we study international relations, how is it relevant to your field of law, and is it actually important that you go beyond the traditional notions of international relations that you only see that this president visited that country, that president came to this country. No, international relations much more than that. Similarly, we discussed the case study of Cold War, the timeline. We discussed various international laws happening. We discussed the alliances. We discussed the various leaders. We discussed events. We discussed how countries managed their internal politics. All those things we discussed. We also discussed a sample question also. So if you're interested in knowing more about all these things, and you, as a student of CLAT, if you can just put a little more effort in understanding all these things, much beyond your exam, that will be my victory. Okay. So do stay in touch with Excelers for getting your hopes that you will clear CLAT and have a great law career ahead. Stick on with us. We'll help you out there. So thank you so much for watching this video. See you all in the classes. Thank you once again.